Chapter 1. 3 more tours and Sasha would be home free. The end-of-season quiet was creeping in, settling over the dense pine and fir she called her office. Soon the last of the tourists would pack up their brand-new, barely used gear and go home. She wasn't sure what she was going to do once she was no longer shepherding clueless Midwesterners or influencers so determined to get the perfect selfie, they seemed intent on falling off a cliff. The solitude was what she craved, what had drawn her to this life, but it also brought a familiar, low-humming anxiety. Too much quiet gave her too much time to think. She definitely wasn't hiding in the gear shed. That would be cowardice, and Sasha Ford was no coward. She was merely taking a meticulous inventory of the equipment, her calloused hands moving with confidence over climbing ropes and carabiners. She hoped Eric would be gone by the time she finished. They said not to date your coworkers. That was true enough. It was even worse when that coworker you dated became an ex, especially in a place this remote. She wasn't sure what she had been thinking, a momentary lapse in judgment fueled by a shared bottle of whiskey and a lonely summer night. Now it was clear. This tour company wasn't big enough for the both of them. The heavy canvas flap of the shed's entrance rustled and slapped against its frame behind her. Sasha winced at the crunch of approaching footsteps on the gravel path. There was only one other person here today, Eric Daniel, the ex. Great. "Hey, Sash, how you doing?" Eric asked. His voice was laced with a casual charm she now found grating, as if they hadn't both been studiously avoiding each other ever since she'd found him sneaking out of Caroline's tent at midnight 2 weeks ago. Sasha didn't turn from the wall of neatly coiled ropes. "Did you need something?" "I know some of the stuff is heavy back here, babe. I thought you could use some help." "Don't call me babe." It landed like a stone in the quiet shed. She hadn't liked it when they were dating. She liked it even less now. "Come on, Sash, no need to be a hard ass." He stepped inside, letting the flap fall closed and plunging the shed into dusty shadowed light. The air suddenly felt thick, too close. "I thought we were just having some fun. We were good together. We could still be good together." "Eric, stop." She clutched a thick bundle of rope, holding it between them like a force field, a boundary he couldn't cross. "It's over. We're done. We don't need to do this, okay?" "Why do you take everything so seriously?" he demanded, his tone shifting from wheedling to sharp. The friendly facade cracked, revealing sour resentment beneath. And right then, Sasha remembered that they were alone, miles from civilization. And her cell phone's reception was spotty at best. Her heart gave a hard, sudden thump in her ribs. Shit. "I just want to get things ready for the tour," she said, her voice impressively steady. "Everybody's coming in a couple of days. It's fine." Eric took another step towards her, his shadow swallowing what little light filtered through the canvas. She hated herself for the instinctual step back she took, the toe of her boot bumping against a stack of sleeping bags. Going deeper into the gear shed only meant she was more trapped. Since when did she think of Eric as the type to trap her? She'd agreed to go out with him because he seemed nice, easygoing. Not this. "You always think you're so much better than everyone else," he sneered. "So I made one little mistake. Get over it." "How is Caroline?" Okay, that was bitchy. But she was allowed. She was the one that got cheated on. Eric made a sound of disgust and turned on his heel, his anger a force in the small space. He shoved the canvas flap aside and stalked out of the shed, leaving Sasha alone with the silence. Thank God. She let out a breath, the tension draining from her shoulders. She really didn't want to deal with that anymore. She got back to work, losing herself in the familiar rhythm of preparation. She tried to forget Eric was still around somewhere. He was infuriatingly decent at his job, almost as good of a guide as she was. She wouldn't hate being on a tour led by him in other circumstances. He knew these woods well, and he had that infectious sense of adventure that made people come back year after year. He even got better reviews than she did, a fact that galled her more than she cared to admit. She was packing up her personal gear for the day, the late afternoon sun slanting through the trees, when she heard voices. A prickle of unease traced up her spine. She shouldn't have heard voices. Eric might be on a call, but again, spotty reception. None of the rest of the team should be there. They were all on a multi-day hike far to the south and weren't due back for another 2 days, unless something went very wrong. A lifetime of caution, of learning to listen to the subtle warnings the world gave her, made her move slowly. Something was off. Eric wasn't in the main camp or in the small gravel parking lot. His beat-up sedan was there right next to her van, and there were no other vehicles. So far not weird. So where was he? And why did she hear voices? Had she finally cracked from the isolation? Hopefully not. Hearing voices in the woods was a totally normal thing, she told herself. A trick of the wind through the pines. But hearing them get louder and more distinct as she stepped further down one of the lesser-used trails meant that they were real and definitely not a figment of her imagination. "I can show you wherever you need to go," Eric was saying, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. "There's no one who knows these woods better than me." That was debatable. She knew them just as well, if not better. But she wasn't going to interrupt this strange meeting to say so. "Are you sure?" another unfamiliar voice asked. He had a strange, clipped accent, one she didn't recognize. In her line of work, she'd heard them all, and had a pretty good ear for placement. This was different. Foreign, but not from any place she could name. Sasha moved with stealth, her boots silent on the pine needle-cushioned earth. She peered through the dense screen of greenery and saw Eric standing in a small, secluded clearing. He was surrounded by 3 men, all of them exceptionally tall and broad-shouldered. They were dressed in dark, functional clothing that looked more tactical than civilian. Their posture was rigid, their presence radiating a quiet menace that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. One of them handed over a thick envelope. Eric took it, a greedy little smile playing on his lips as he weighed it in his hands. Drug money? She didn't think Eric had that kind of sideline. Trail guides weren't paid well. Some weed on the side was one thing, but that fat stack was way more than a little weed. What was he into? Meth? Pills? Her mind raced. Should she say something? Should she call the cops? Her phone was useless out there. She had no signal. Should she run away and pretend she didn't see any of this? Yeah, that one. That was probably the best option. Sasha took a careful step back, and her boot heel came down squarely on top of the only dry, brittle leaf in a 3-mile radius. It cracked with a sound that seemed to echo like a gunshot in the suddenly silent clearing. She bit her lip hard to keep from cursing, her body tensing to stone. She risked a glance back at Eric and his shady friends. Her blood ran cold. One of the tall strangers was looking right at her, his head tilted. His eyes, even from that distance, seemed to bore through the foliage, pinning her in place. They were an impossible, bright yellow, and for a terrifying second she thought she saw them glow with an internal fire. Oh, hell no. He tilted his head. "Who is that?" he asked, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. She wasn't going to stick around for introductions. She pivoted and ran, her survival instincts screaming. She heard Eric shout something after her, his voice tight with panic, but she couldn't make out the words. Something scorched the air behind her, searing her back in a wave of intense heat. Fire? Did they have flamethrowers? What kind of drug dealers were they? She didn't waste time looking back. She pumped her arms and ran like her life depended on it, because she knew with chilling certainty that it did. The forest floor, familiar beneath her boots, flew by in a blur of green and brown. Her lungs burned and her heart hammered in her ribs, but fear was a fuel more potent than oxygen. She risked a single fleeting glance back over her shoulder, and what she saw made her stumble. A ribbon of flame was snaking through the woods behind her. It didn't spread or burn like a normal fire. It moved with a terrifying liquid grace, like some sort of living entity that danced between the trees, incinerating ferns and vaporizing moths. It had a mind of its own, and it was coming for her.